Living off your portfolio's dividends in retirement seems like a pretty simple and foolproof strategy. You never have to sell your investment and therefore you can never run out of money. But it's not quite that simple. Before diving in, let me just say that I know that this video is going to ruffle some feathers because dividends are loved by many retirees and a lot of financial advisors for that matter. But before you go and hit the dislike button, I'm going to challenge you right now to watch the whole video. And if you still disagree with me, then by all means let me know why in the comments section below. Now let me be clear, there's nothing wrong with companies that pay dividends. The issue lies in how dividends are often misunderstood by investors. These misunderstandings fall into four categories: that they're free money, that they're guaranteed, the tax implication of dividends, and the diversification that dividend stocks allow you to have. Let's break each of these down, starting off with why dividends are not free money. So let's take a look at a comment that I received on a recent video. I've blurred some of it out as it's irrelevant to today's topic, but let's take a look. So easy example, with $2 million, you just buy a monthly dividend fund or ETF. The price moves extremely so it's low risk, up or down. You will get about $145,000 per year in dividends. Now you just use that cash to live, and you haven't even touched your $2 million, which has probably grown as well. This is a very common understanding of how dividends work, but before you go and implement this advice, there's a few things that you should be aware of. The first being that dividends are not free money. When people hear dividends, they immediately think of savings accounts as well. When you have a savings account, let's say you have $100 in it, if you make 4% interest, you're going to have $104. But unfortunately, that's not how dividends work. Let's say that you have $100 in the left pocket of your jeans. You're feeling very generous today, so you decide to pay your right pocket a $4 dividend. Well, now you have $96 in your left pocket and $4 in your right pocket. You still have $100 in your jeans. No new wealth was created simply because you paid out a dividend. It's the same thing in the stock market. Let's say that you own 100 shares of ABC stock and it's trading at $20. So you have $2,000 in this stock. ABC stock now pays out a dividend of $4, and as we just saw in our jeans example, that's going to reduce the price of that stock by the corresponding amount. So now the share price is down to $16. You still own 100 shares, so you have $1,600 in ABC stock, and you have $400 in your pocket from the dividend. So again, you're still in the same position where overall you still have $2,000. So you might be saying to yourself, well, Mark, I don't always take the cash from my dividends. I often reinvest them. Well, the math still stays the same. Now the share price is at $16, like we just saw, and you have $400 in cash and you want to reinvest it. So you take that $400, buy the ABC stock at $16 a share, and now you have an additional 25 shares. So in total, now you have 125 shares. It's trading at $16. You still have $2,000 overall. No new wealth was created simply because ABC stock paid out a dividend. So if we go back to our YouTube comment, you have $2 million, you get paid out a dividend of $145,000. Well, we know that the portfolio's value is going to drop by a corresponding amount. So now you're left with $1,855,000 left in your portfolio. So you've clearly infringed upon your capital, even though you haven't sold any of the investments within it. Now, by all means, that portfolio can grow back up to $2 million just based on the growth of the stocks within the portfolio, but that's not guaranteed and it has nothing to do with the dividend that was paid out. Now, you might have noticed that when you get paid a dividend, that the share price doesn't go down by the exact same amount in the real world. And you're right, it's not a one-to-one ratio because there are other factors at play that affect the stock price during the day. For example, let's go back to ABC stock. It's trading at $20. It's going to pay out a dividend of $4. So as we know, the stock price is going to drop to $16. But on that same day, they announced a new product that's going to change the world, and the stock price jumps up to $30. And you might think that that's due to the dividend, but the dividend is actually holding that share price back. If they hadn't paid out a dividend on that day, the share price would have actually jumped up to $34. So there are other factors at play that affect the stock price on the day that the dividend is paid out. Let's take a look at the 10 largest companies of the S&P 500 High Dividend Index for the period of December 2018 to October 2023. Now, during that period, the average dividend paid out was $1, but the average share price decrease when dividends were paid was $1.15. So we know $1 of that was simply due to the dividends being paid out, and the other 15-cent decrease was just due to other factors that were affecting stock prices on those days. Now let's move on to the second misunderstanding, which is that dividends are guaranteed. I often hear investors say, I don't care if the market is down 30% with my dividend strategy because I'm not forced to sell anything. I'm still going to receive my dividends, which is going to keep my cash flow the same. But let's take a closer look. During the last meaningful market correction, which took place in 2020, U.S. companies cut their dividends by 22%. Countries in emerging markets cut by 29%, and all other countries reduced dividends by 41%. Now, when you add all those up, that's a pretty significant amount, and it's a pretty significant reduction in your cash flow that's coming in. The key takeaway here is that dividends are not guaranteed. When companies are in trouble economically, they're going to look at cutting their dividends to make sure they don't go out of business. The third misunderstanding is the tax implications of dividends, specifically in non-registered accounts. So just going back to that quote I mentioned with investors that they're not worried about their portfolio when the market is down 30% because they're still getting their dividends and therefore never have to sell any of their portfolio. Well, in some instances, it's actually better to sell than to receive a dividend. Let's compare two approaches to generating income. One is to receive a dividend and the other is to simply sell shares. All right, so let's start off with Jim. Jim bought 100 shares of XYZ stock at $30. However, the market is currently going through a correction and Jim stock is now worth $20, so a 33% decrease. But Jim isn't worried about his cash flow because he knows that XYZ is going to pay a $2 dividend. However, as we know, when a dividend is paid out, the stock price will be reduced by the corresponding amount. So yes, Jim is right. He didn't have to sell when the price of XYZ was down, but the fact that a dividend was paid out still had a negative effect on his share price, and his net position is still the same. Comparatively, let's take a look at Sarah. She owns TUV stock, and same idea, she purchased 100 shares for $30, and they're now trading for $20. She needs $200 for her cash flow, but TUV doesn't pay a dividend. So she's forced to sell some shares to free up some cash. So she sells 10 shares to generate $200, and now there's $1,800 left in the shares and $200 in cash. So she's in the exact same position as the XYZ stock. However, if the transaction occurred in her non-registered account, she would be able to apply that loss against any gains that she's had over the past 3 years or any future gains that she will trigger. So there is a tax benefit to selling the investment and claiming the loss. On the other hand, Jim can't claim a loss because he hasn't sold anything. And to rub salt further into the wound, he's going to have to add that dividend income to his tax return, even though he's down 30% on the year. So our last misunderstanding is diversification. So back in 1927, 68% of US companies paid a dividend, and that number today has dropped down to 38%. By only focusing on dividend-paying stocks, a lot of great companies are being left out of the portfolio. In the US, for example, you'd be missing out on Amazon, Tesla, and Berkshire Hathaway as an example. And just going back to taxation for a moment, dividends received from foreign companies are not going to be taxed as favorably in Canada. Thus, if you want the most tax-efficient dividend-paying stocks, well, now you're stuck to buying Canadian companies. That's because Canadian corporations can pay out what's called eligible dividends, and depending on what province you're in, they can be taxed quite favorably. However, eligible dividends can come with their own set of problems as well. Let's say that you're 65 years old and you have a taxable income of $80,000, and that's made up from your CPP, OAS, and the rest is coming from your portfolio. Now let's say on top of that, you receive a $20,000 eligible dividend in your non-registered account. Well, you're going to have to take that $20,000 dividend and increase it by 38% and then include it on your tax return. Now, we're not going to go as to why that happens in this video, but this can have a very negative impact on your government benefits. So in a situation like this, you wouldn't be adding $20,000 to your tax return. It'd be more like $27,000. Now your income's ballooned up to over $107,000, which is over the old age security clawback amount, so your OAS will be affected moving forward. Now, you do get some of this money back via the dividend tax credit. Again, we're not going to go into that in this video today, but again, nonetheless, your OAS will be affected. On the other hand, again, if your income is $80,000 and you trigger a $20,000 capital gain, well, only half of that capital gain is added to your income for the year. So now you're at $90,000, which is under the OAS clawback threshold. So does this mean that you should avoid dividend stocks altogether? Absolutely not. There are a lot of great companies that pay dividends and that will continue to grow into the future. All I'm saying is don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Allocating your entire portfolio to dividend-paying stocks is rarely the best strategy to maximize growth or for tax efficiency. Make sure to review and consider all of your options. Thanks for watching, and if you're looking for a plan that optimizes your taxes, your income, and your investments, check us out at transcanadawealthmanagement.com.